All right, let's get into it. Let's just get straight into it and go to our first topic, and it's surrounding Heung-min Son. And obviously, we know about Heung-min Son. He's had his best performances for Spurs coming from the bench this season, has struggled in games where he has started this season. So the question is, should Son stay on the bench or should he start in the next game against Chelsea and for the foreseeable future? We'll start with you, Josh. What are you thinking?
Specifically about Chelsea, I would definitely put him on the bench for me, just because it's worked in the last game now, and you don't want to just, he had that point in the last Leicester game, didn't he? Where not the last Leicester game, the one before, where he came on and scored a hat-trick. Next game, he was back to being rubbish again. So you want to keep that hunger, I would say. But also, I was listening to something that Nathan from the Extra Inch was saying, which is like, can you imagine having to deal with Richarlison for 60, 65 minutes where, he's elbowing, fighting for every single ball. He's just a handful. He's totally different to Son, where he's physical and he actually kind of like tires you out physically. Son, it's more a mental thing. You have to worry about when he's making those runs and stuff. He's not getting in and around you. But having to deal with that, whoever their left back or left centre back is or whatever, and then, or their right back even, and then Son coming on against tired legs, using his pace, which is already starting to wane a little bit, as he gets older. I think it's a good option to have. But yeah, I'd keep him on the bench for now. Maybe the next 2 or 3 games, and if he keeps on playing well, or his replacement, whoever that is, like Richarlison or Danjuma or whoever it is, if they're not doing well, then you'd look at starting Son again. But we've done this before. He needs now a run on the bench for me. Always should be brought on. He always should get minutes, but I think he needs to stay on the bench for a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because me and Sim, we spoke about that in the post-match review about Richarlison, how he physically kind of tires out the centre-backs and Sonny can come on and do his thing against tired legs. And I think it's a really good point, to be honest. Danny, how are you feeling about the situation?
Yeah, I've been saying this for a while now. Like, I think Son he's been really, like, no disrespect to Son because he's one of our best players, but he's been pathetic this season, like to his standards, to what we expect of him. So, for me, I think what I've seen the last 2 times he's actually come off the bench, he's got 4 goals in two sub appearances. So, you can obviously see it's causing him to react to his situation a lot more by coming off the bench and impacting the game a lot more than, say, any of the other players will impact the game. Like, I think he impacts the game more than, well, he has done technically more than anyone we've had this season, and he's only come off the bench twice. So for me, I think if you want to talk about like squad rotation and things like that, I think Richarlison needs to have that little run in the team, give him a couple of games, and I think it will only do Son the world of good if he comes on against Chelsea, scores a goal. If he comes on against the next match, scores a goal or sets up a goal, it's gonna keep him motivated to try and stay on that path and try get his form up again and get to the level where we know Son can be consistently. And I think, like Josh was saying, I think you've got players like Danjuma. I would like to see Danjuma given a little bit of a chance as well. But for me right now, I think Richarlison has to be the one who's got to get that run first. And I just think the reasons why Son coming off the bench can only help Tottenham more, because when we are struggling to break teams down, like I know we've had injuries this season, a lot of injuries, but when we are struggling to break teams down, you want someone who's going to come on like a Son, who's got that quality in him, that you give him that one chance, he's going to put that ball in the back of the net. And that's exactly what he did against West Ham. And he took the touch, was a brilliant touch on his left foot. And there's a great, on his right foot, sorry, outside of the right foot. And it was a great finish as well. And you could see the confidence in that finish. Like you could see the confidence straight away by the way that he controlled that ball. And there's a great pass from Harry Kane, and then tucked it away, like as you see Son of old, basically. So I think Son on the bench is definitely a good thing for us, and I think we should embrace it more.
Yeah, I kind of am feeling the same as you two. I think definitely in this next game against Chelsea, I personally believe Son should be on the bench. I'm not sure if I prefer Richarlison or Danjuma. I mean, Richarlison always leaves you wanting more, and Danjuma just hasn't had that go yet. But Sim, how are you feeling about it?
I feel like it's a difficult balancing act when it comes to this question, because whether a player starts or not, a lot is to do with usually their form, the form of the player who's coming in for them, and also how it's going to help the team. Now, with the Son question, it's difficult when he's just come on and scored. Obviously, he wants to be starting every game. He is our best player from left wing, whatever you want to say about his form and Richarlison and Danjuma. He is our best player. So we know the link up with Kane is always still a vital part of our team. So when we're putting him on the bench, are we just doing that? Like, if we're doing it as a tactic to exploit tired legs, then that's something. But if it's to do with kind of how it's going to benefit your team, like exponentially, like you got to remember when Son's come on and he's scored these goals, we've been winning in both these games. Against Leicester, we're 3-2 up. Against West Ham, we're already 1-0 up. So these are prime examples of Son coming on, and this is perfect for him because the opposition have to come out a bit. They have to chase the game, and that leaves all the space for Son to run into and exploit that space. If he's coming on when we're already losing or we're drawing or something, it could be a very different situation. Maybe he won't be as effective as he is now when we're already winning. And do you want to risk not having him from the start, and then not having enough time to affect the game when he does come on if we're not winning at that point? You know, if he comes on and we're losing and he can't turn it around, you're thinking, well, why didn't we just start him when he can make a difference? Especially, for example, if Richarlison does start and he misses a few chances and then we're already losing. So there is a difficult balancing act to be had there. But what I would say is I feel like when you buy a player like Richarlison, you spend 60 million on him, and Son has been playing the way he has been playing, you have to give him a run, and I think you have to give him a chance to kind of have that chance to prove himself, because it's no good him having one appearance here, one appearance there, off the right, one appearance off the left, 5 minutes on a sub. He needs a consistent run of form. And I feel like he hasn't shown his best at Tottenham so far. I feel like he hasn't been able to find his rhythm, and I feel like it's only fair that he gets a chance. What's it called, to have a consistent run of games, at least 3 or 4. So I would start him on that basis, but I would be careful in terms of be careful what you wish for, in a way, if we're thinking about benching Son as an overall thing, because as Stellini said, this is one of the guys in the squad who we know 100% can make the difference. And I know he hasn't been doing it this season. I agree with that, but we know what Sonny can bring. And if I'm just imagining a situation where we bench Son, you know, Richarlison or Danjuma have missed a few chances, and we bring on Son to save a game where we're like 1-0 down and he's just not able to do it. You know, and I'm just worried about that kind of situation. But I'm thinking of the game on Sunday. I think Reece James, we know Azpilicueta is going to be out because he got concussion. So we know Reece James is pretty much going to start on Sunday. He's a player who struggled with fitness. He's a player who Chelsea managers have struggled to get 90 minutes out of this player, out of Reece James, either for injury or because of stamina issues. Tuchel always complained about his lack of stamina. And if that is the case, and we're thinking if Azpilicueta's out and he's probably going to be forced to play 90 minutes, I think that's even more prime to get Son off the bench, because if he's struggling with his stamina, Reece James, imagine Son coming on after an hour when James is struggling a bit, and he can have a good run at him, and I think that could be a very, very good situation for us.
It kind of feels that any player we bring in those positions, whether it be a backup forward, a backup left winger, even a backup right winger now with Kulusevski in the frame, it feels like all these players are just set up to fail because we can't take any of these players out of the team. Whatever manager it is, they're always going to play Son, they're always going to play Kane, and obviously Kulusevski has emerged himself as well as maybe one of those players too. But What has the actual problem been with Heung-min Son this season? I've heard people saying maybe it's Perisic occupying those spaces tactically. Maybe we're not getting the best out of Son anymore as he's progressed as a player. Or is it just simply that he's just not on form at the moment? Josh, what are you thinking?
I think it's quite clear. Like Conte, at the start when he first came in, started trying to play Son like, he was talking about his two number 10s. Like he was having Lucas Moura and Son behind Kane and the wing backs wide or whatever. I don't claim to be a tactical genius or anything, but I think this bit is quite obvious.
Give yourself some credit, mate. Come on.
But I think this bit is quite obvious, which is like, basically, he was doing that. And Son, remember people were complaining about Son's performances when Conte first came in. He was still scoring, but they were complaining about his performances. Yeah. Now, his performances got amazing, and he went on that amazing scoring run when Conte started to just say, just hang on the last man and just let Kane find you, innit? Just like Mourinho did before. Can you guys hear me, or am I cutting out?
Yeah.
So it's cutting out on my side a bit, but yeah. So when he was told to just hang on the last man, and Ryan Sessegnon would start coming in field a little bit more, or Matt Doherty, and Son wasn't asked to do all this build up and come in and be like a number 10 sometimes and stuff like that. He was just told to just stay on the last man and make runs all day long. That's when he was killing it. And then as soon as we've come to this season now, Conte's reverted back to what he originally was doing, was he was getting Son to do all this build-up play. He's never been a build-up player. Do you know what I mean? He's not someone that he doesn't have the greatest... He has a good touch when it comes to like turning and finishing, but he's not a great passer. He's not he's not very press resistant. He's not very strong. He can't muscle anyone off. So he can't do any of this like come in midfield and help out stuff. So I think that's what it is. I'm not blaming it on Conte, but like Son can't do what Conte needs him to do in this system. I honestly don't believe that, innit? So, but yeah, apart from that, I think it's worth mentioning that I've heard quite a few Chelsea fans say that Richarlison's guaranteed to score his first Premier League goal against them. So that's another reason that I'd definitely bench Son, because he was going to go to them, wasn't he?
I was actually drilling into. I was looking because I was doing a video, which will be out maybe today or tomorrow, about Son, like a short. And I was drilling into some of the stats of comparing Son this season to his past few seasons, like his expected goals per 90, shots per 90, all this kind of stuff. And it's very interesting because the last season and the season before last, he outscored his XG by 7 goals. So he's ridiculous. Like his finishing is ridiculous. Like he's scoring from like impossible angles. And this season, he's actually got 5 XG and 5 goals. So is it a case of maybe his like? And if you look at shots per 90, like this season, it's 1.34. That season under Mourinho, when him and Kane had mad link up and he scored 17 Premier League goals, it was only 1.01. So he's actually having more shots on target per 90 this season than he was that season under Mourinho, and it's quite similar to last season as well. So I don't know what you can learn from these stats. Is it a case of maybe his finishing isn't as ridiculous as it used to be, or like? Because in terms of like the quality of chances, he seems to be getting a similar quality of chances he always has been.
It's the quality of finishing, Tim.
Yeah,
it's the quality.
Is it just
confidence?
Maybe it's a form and confidence thing then.
It's confidence.
I'll tell you why I disagree with that, because I know the stats are matching up, but like what I think is happening is like Son is then closer to the build-up play when we're like he's closer to the goal basically. We're like, against teams that are sitting back and stuff like that, we're higher up the pitch. We are like kind of trying to play through them. So Sonny's getting silly shots, like shots. He's getting lots of shots on the edge of the box, lots of shots that aren't as high class opportunities as like when he's running through on goal. So like how many times can you remember in the past 10 games Son running through on goal like he used to once or twice a match? Like, obviously the last game, West Ham, but not many. And that he used to do that once or twice a match under Mourinho. We'd always have a break where he is running through on goal, and that is his bread and
But
butter
do
finish.
you know what, Josh? People forget this. Yeah. What about last season? He was still managed under Conte last season, and he had his highest scoring season ever for us last season under Conte. So
Yeah.
the one thing that I don't agree with when people say, I've heard people use the argument Perisic as a massive flaw in the way Son plays, but I honestly don't think it is. I just think it's partly the way that that he's been told what he needs to do, and I think it's the defensive liabilities that we have in the team. And what you see, I've seen quite a few heat maps this season of where Son's position has been in a lot of games, and if you see him, he's actually a lot deeper than where he should normally be, right? He's playing a lot deeper. So what that tells me is that he's having to track back a lot more and do a lot more defensive work, and he's not in that position like he was last season, where he was running in behind on the break and literally obliterating defenders who like in front of him. Because we know Son's not like the most amazing dribbler, but he's just got raw pace and he can just burst past people when he's on the break. And I think we haven't seen that a lot this season. And I think like the one time where we kind of saw it was against Man City, right? But if you look at the heat maps and you looked at what he was doing in that game, it was like he was an attacking midfielder. It was like he was playing central, and every single time he got the ball from deep line position, central midfield, and he was just driving with the ball every single time. And I think that's been the difference, I think, with the way that the tactics have been maybe this season. But I also think it's also partly his confidence as well, because if he is being, none of us can sit here and say we know if Conte is telling him to come back more. Maybe it's a thing that he wants the whole team to do when they're defending. Get the wingers to come back more, help the wing backs more, because we know. Look, let's be honest. Our defense is one of the worst in the league, right? So we have to account for that as well. So I think what it is, I think last season they were a lot more disciplined and organized with the defense, and I think you could give them a little bit more trust, right? And I think that's allowed them to kind of play like Son allowed to play his game a bit more. So I think it's a bit of everything why Son, for me, why he's having this off season. I think you could probably put it down to a bit of tactics. You could probably put it down to how bad our defense have been this season, and him having to come back more and track back more. And on top of that, you probably could say that because he hasn't been getting the goals, he doesn't have the belief in himself to feel that he can achieve those levels that he achieved last season. And you can see it in his game. His touch has been awful all season. His finishing, and you're talking about his shots on target. What I've noticed this season, his shots have been really poor shots on target. Like they've been really. He's like, I think Josh said it. He's had chances, right? He just hasn't been putting them in the net. And I think that is down to confidence. He just doesn't have that clinical edge that you see and you expect from Son. Because if you take out this season's stats, right, going back 5 seasons, right, from last season, Son is the third most or second most clinical finisher in Europe, right? So I think Haaland and Mbappe are the only ones who are more clinical than him, right? Yeah. And they're obviously two like superstar talents. So when you're comparing Son to those players in terms of clinical finishing, right? You can obviously see there's something not right with him, and I think it's a bit of everything for me, anyway.
Danny, just to touch on your point about Son maybe doing more tracking back in defense and like defensively and stuff. I was also looking at like some of his defensive stats, like this season compared to previous seasons. And what interestingly stood out to me is that last season he actually does usually do quite a lot of defensive work. He usually does like in terms of tackles plus interceptions, he usually like 1.5 per 90. Right. Last season was the only season in the last like 6 seasons where he did under 1 action per 90. Yeah. So he was doing far less defensive work last season.
And he had his highest scoring season
than he has been in any of his previous seasons, and including this season as well. He's doing a lot more this season as well. So it looks as like his defensive work has gone up, and maybe that's hurting his game a bit potentially. So there's a few things that's happened. His defensive work is going up, and his ridiculous finishing isn't as ridiculous as it used to be, basically.
Well, yeah, you can clearly see it. Like you can clearly see, like this season, we're like the 5th or 4th worst defensive team in the Premier League in terms of goals conceded. We're terrible. We're so bad defensively, and you wonder why. When you're playing like the top teams, if you watch them, like a lot of the times we're trying to defend with like a lot of people behind the ball, or sometimes if we're not defending as a team and we're not solid, right? We send one or two of the defenders or one of the midfielders tends to press, right? And they go up and they get caught out on the press and they don't track back. And then that's when we get exposed. And that's how we concede a lot of goals this season. So it's definitely got to be something to do with it as well, because under Conte last season, we were pretty good defensively. Like, well, I'm not saying we were amazing, but we didn't concede a lot of goals. And we were one of the, I think since he came in, we conceded one of the least amount of goals. I think it was like third or fourth in the stats table or something like that. So you can definitely see the correlation between the two. You can definitely see it.
But when
on the Perisic argument that we were talking about before, there's a stat here brought up by Will Stewart a couple of days ago on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it, but he said Heung-min Son has scored 0 goals in 1,863 minutes with Perisic on the pitch at left wing back. He scored 7 goals while Perisic has been on the bench, and he scored 2 goals while Perisic has been deployed as a striker. Are those stats telling for you, or is there nothing in that? We'll start with you, Josh.
Well, all you have to do is look at, the Leicester game when I think it was either 1-1 or we were 1-0 up. The game that we lost 4-1.
Oh, is he gone? Oh, he was just getting into his stride. Have we all gone?
No, I can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear us. Yeah, he's back.
He's
back.
Sorry.
Yeah, go on, Josh. You're just getting into your stride.
Yeah. That point where we had that break, went into Harry Kane, and he turned and played that beautiful ball into Perisic. Or it might have been 0-0. I can't remember, to be honest.
I think it was 1-0 Spurs at the point, yeah.
1-0 Spurs, exactly. And you're thinking we're going to go on now. Perisic runs up. That is where Son is usually. Do you know what I mean? Like, Son, in seasons gone by, the only person to receive that pass would be Son. Do you know what I mean? He would run through on goal and he would score that in his sleep. He scores those for fun. Even this without, we say his confidence is a little bit less this season. I still think if you give him 1 or 2 of those a game, he's going to score 1. Do you know what I mean? Every game. So yeah, I think it probably does have something. I think there's a number of different things that Danny keeps saying as well. There's loads of different things, but I think also Perisic making the same runs could be an issue as well.
Yeah, and I think if you think back to last season, who Son was playing with left wing back, obviously we were rotating between Sessegnon and Reguilon, 2 fairly defensive options, and maybe Son didn't feel the need to offer them as much defensive protection as he has to offer someone like Perisic, and maybe that's also part of the issue. But they don't. But one thing for sure, they don't really seem to be linking up in the forward areas, do they, Son and Perisic at the moment anyway? And maybe that's maybe there is something to that. Maybe they have to learn each other's game. But yeah, I think Perisic. Obviously, Perisic is interesting when we look at Perisic on the left and maybe say Emerson on the right, because I don't know. Obviously, it's been a tactical tweak for Emerson to start coming inside and playing a bit more centrally. But Perisic is never going to do that. He's always going to stay very wide. But what Emerson is doing is creating that space a bit wider for Kulusevski to play in and give him a bit more space in those wide areas. So could Son help with that? But then people argue Son is strongest when he's in the central areas. So I don't know if that is the problem or not.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Sonny needs to get back to what he was at last season, really just tugging that last line of defence and really trying to get in behind and be as central as possible. And that will give us areas out wide for Perisic to get good deliveries in the box and what have you. I think that's the way to go, to be honest. But look, I think let's move on now because we've still got some other topics to get through. Next up, we're going to be